Hello guys, this is Real Recaps. In this video, I will talk about a 2024 American thriller film, Don't Move. Before we start, I hope you will like and subscribe to the channel. At the beginning of the film, we meet Iris, who is grieving her son Mateo, who has passed away. The only keepsake she has of him is a small toy boat. While her husband sleeps, she gets out of bed, takes a knife from a drawer, and leaves her phone behind as she steps out of the house. She drives through a forest, parks her car, continues on foot to a place filled with memories, where Mateo's memorial stands. There, she lingers by a tree where his initials are carved, revisiting painful memories that push her toward despair. Overwhelmed by dark thoughts, she approaches a cliff's edge, contemplating ending her life to be reunited with Mateo. At that moment, a man named Richard interrupts her. He asks about the memorial she's at, but she refuses to answer. While standing at the edge, she looks down again. Richard jokingly suggests that if she intends to jump, she should at least share her name. She stays silent as he begins talking about his life, revealing he was once passionate about cars but was involved in a terrible accident with his girlfriend, Chloe, during college. He feels guilty about their last argument before the crash. Iris expresses sympathy, and Richard adds that he spent 2 painful months in the hospital recovering. She recalls a day when her husband was carving their initials into a tree while Mateo was gathering sticks to roast marshmallows. Mateo had boasted that he could gather the sticks in under a minute, but Iris doubted him and went off to collect wildflowers. They didn't hear when Mateo fell, and Iris laments that the world often takes what it wants, wishing it had taken her instead. She confesses that she couldn't cry, which she feels is the worst part, and admits that she feels broken. Richard offers her comforting words, reminding her that being broken doesn't mean being hopeless. As he prepares to leave, Iris finally shares her name and Richard emphasizes that the choice of what to do next is hers. Before departing, he points out the beauty of the day. Iris follows Richard as they leave the mountain trail and head toward their cars. When they reach their cars, Iris says goodbye. Richard asks if she plans to return to the hilltop, but she reassures him she won't. He smiles and says he'll take today before entering his car. However, as Richard parked too close to Iris's car, she can't get in. He notices this, exits his car, and approaches her with a strange-looking umbrella. She asks if it's for rain, and he cryptically says, "You cannot be more prepared." He then plunges the umbrella's base into her stomach, sending an electric shock through her body, causing her to faint. He ties her up, places her in the back seat of his car, and drives off. When Iris regains consciousness, she panics and tries to call her husband using her smartwatch. Richard warns her that she won't get a signal. Iris tells him her husband will look for her and that he doesn't have to do this. Richard coldly responds that he has heard similar lines from many women he has kidnapped before, who claim they have children and are mothers, but he doesn't care. He then places a toy boat near her. Iris, thinking quickly, uses her knife to cut through the plastic tie, distracting Richard as she attempts to free herself. She asks about Chloe, but Richard turns the conversation back to her son, prompting her to reveal his name was Mateo. Iris finally frees herself from the rope and attacks Richard, causing the car to crash into a tree. She tries to escape, but Richard pulls her back, and a violent struggle ensues. In the end, she manages to escape, grabbing the toy boat and stuffing it in her pocket. As she's screaming for help, Richard asks her if she's starting to feel anything. Iris demands he stop with the nonsense and explain himself. Richard reveals that he injected her with a paralyzing drug that will gradually shut down her body over the next 20 minutes. He explains that in the first minute, her fine motor skills will begin to fail, making it difficult to hold things like a knife or phone. By minute 10, her legs will start to tingle, and by minute 15, they will lose function. Her breathing will become labored at minute 18, and by minute 20, she will lose her voice and become completely paralyzed. Iris decides to flee, dropping her knife in the process, but the escape speeds up the effects of the injection. She begins to lose control over her body. She sets a timer for 20 minutes, but each step becomes increasingly difficult. As Richard follows her at a measured pace, she eventually loses the ability to walk and hides, hoping to evade him. He comes close to her hiding spot before leaving, and as ants crawl onto her face, she's overwhelmed and screams, alerting him to her location. Desperate, she throws herself into a nearby body of water, surrendering to the current. Unable to swim with her failing limbs, she is carried to the edge of a tree. Using only her arms, she reaches the surface and pulls herself onto the grass. With her remaining time slipping away, Iris can no longer move or speak, but she is still conscious, able to hear and see everything around her as her body succumbs to the effects of the injection. An elderly man, Bill, who is cleaning his lawn with a lawn mower, notices her and asks if she can speak, but she's unable to move her mouth. He moves his finger in front of her, and she follows its movement with her eyes. Bill asks if she can hear him, and she blinks to confirm. He inquires whether she can move, and she blinks twice to indicate no. Then, he asks if she's hurt, and again, she blinks twice. Bill decides to take her inside and call 911. She blinks once in agreement. He brings a wheelbarrow and drags her inside, but then they hear a knock at the door. Iris blinks rapidly, trying to warn him that it's likely Richard, but Bill doesn't understand. He opens the door and encounters Richard, who asks if he has seen his wife, describing her to be short, pretty, and they were involved in a car accident. Bill, feeling suspicious, says he will call for help and shuts the door, but Richard forces his way inside and begins searching for Iris, who isn't in the wheelbarrow. Bill threatens to call the police if Richard doesn't leave. Richard asks if the Bill has a phone since he lost his, and says he doesn't care if the police come because he lost his wife. Richard introduces himself as Andrew, and that his wife, Chloe, had mental health problems. He adds that she was driving while they were arguing, floored the car, and crashed. He can't remember what happened after that. Richard reveals that his wife, Chloe, becomes catatonic when things get bad. Bill comments that it must be complicated, and Richard asks if Bill has anyone in his life. Reluctantly, Bill opens up about his wife having had a heart attack, and how they both focused too much on him and ignored her health. Richard says that the world takes what it wants, echoing something Iris had said earlier. When Bill asks if Richard loves his wife, he replies affirmatively. Just as Bill is about to tell Richard where Iris is, Richard's phone buzzes in his pocket. Bill becomes suspicious and questions why Richard has his phone when he claimed to have lost it. Richard blames his disorientation and presses Bill about where Iris is. Bill apologizes and tells him she's in the shed, but Richard doesn't believe him and demands the phone. While Richard is distracted, Bill uses the opportunity to push him into a shelf, knocking him to the ground. As Bill calls 911, Richard wrestles him to the ground. The struggle continues, and when Bill is about to strike, Richard grabs a knife and stabs him in the foot, then repeatedly stabs him. Unable to find Iris, Richard pours gasoline throughout the house and sets it on fire. Iris, trying to get his attention, pulls back a blind, and when Richard sees it, he realizes she's inside. He enters the house, carries her out, and places her in his car. He tells her he has never killed anyone before but jokes that there's a first time for everything. He then receives a call from his daughter, who excitedly shares that she got good marks. She mentions meeting him at the cabin, which surprises him. He asks her to give the phone to his wife, Lizzie, who comments that Richard has been taking more solo trips and that their daughter, Olivia, needs a change of scenery. Richard reluctantly agrees. At a gas station, Richard stops to refuel. As he fills the tank, he notices the card reader is out of order, so he goes inside to pay with cash. Meanwhile, Iris tries to remove her seatbelt. A woman and child pull up in a car. The child approaches Iris, reminding her of her son, and the woman scolds the child for wandering off. She seems suspicious of Iris, who appears desolate. Richard quickly finishes fueling, secures Iris's seatbelt, and drives back to the site of their crash. There, he changes clothes and takes out the syringe umbrella and some tools from his car, heading toward the old man's truck to repair his own car. Soon, a police car pulls up, and the officer questions Richard. Richard explains that his wife, who was drunk, crashed the car and deflecting questions about his expired license and visible injuries. The officer grows suspicious, and as he questions Richard further, he notices Iris attempting to open the window. Iris attempts to speak, and the officer moves closer, trying to understand her. Using this moment, Richard strikes the officer and kills him. He then pours gasoline on the police car and sets it ablaze. As they drive away, Iris asks Richard if he feels helpless. Richard dismisses the idea and reveals that he found clarity while watching his girlfriend die in front of him after a 2-month hospital stay. Iris asks what he said to her while she was dying, and he admits that he thanked her. Iris pleads with him, saying he doesn't have to continue down this path, especially since he has a beautiful family. She tells him that if he keeps going, his daughter will suffer the same way when he's jailed, and she asks him to drop her off on the side of the road since she doesn't know his identity. She reminds him that being broken doesn't mean being hopeless, echoing his own words. Richard scoffs and declares that he is not broken. He tells her the plan has changed and drives toward a pier. Upon arrival, he expresses regret that their time together is short. Iris stabs him with the injection, but lacks the strength to fully administer it. Richard laughs, saying she hasn't regained full function in her body and empties the contents. Iris tearfully asks why he's doing this, especially since she had already tried to end her life at the hilltop. He admits that he wanted to make her want to live, only to crush that will because he enjoys it. She screams, and Richard takes out a knife and hogties her. He drags her onto a boat and begins sailing. As she sobs, she begs for her son's toy, which is in her pocket. Seeing her cry, he agrees to retrieve it. As he approaches her, she grabs the knife from his belt and stabs him in the side of the neck. He draws a gun, but Iris shifts, causing him to lose his balance, dropping the gun and falling into the water. Iris seizes the gun and shoots him, but accidentally damages the boat, which starts to sink. Still weakened, she begins to drown alongside the sinking boat, leaving only the toy boat afloat. Moments later, she resurfaces and manages to swim to safety. On shore, she spots Richard, who has also made it out of the water. She walks up to him, mustering her remaining strength. Her last words to him echo his own to his deceased girlfriend, "Thank you." She then leaves him there, helpless and bleeding out. The end. Thanks for watching.